Now I would like to introduce Lisa Stomer from Audit Management, MTU Aero Engines AG. Lisa's going to speak about risk-based audit system, internal and supplier. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Becky. Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Stomer. I'm part of the audit management team of MTU Aero Engines. We have two roles in relation to ACE 13100. On the one hand, we are part of the AASQ team and the subject matter interest groups. And on the other hand, we are also a supplier and have to implement the new requirements. So what I would like to present to you today is what we at MTU understand by a risk-based audit system and how we want to implement it. Next slide, please. So first of all, I will focus on the topic risk. So I picked out the main requirements for risk in relation to audit. For that, I will refer to the ACE 13100 and as well as to the reference manual on quality audit methods. This is RM 13005. After that, I want to show you how a risk-based approach can be implemented depending on the audit type. And then I will explain the MTU way to risk-based supplier audits as one part of a risk-based audit system. And finally, I will give you an insight into the current challenges and opportunities we see for future development. Next slide, please. So what does the ACE 13100 say about risk? Maybe an interesting fact to start with, if you search for the word risk in ACE 13100 and also the reference manual, you get 92 and 34 hits. If you look at the number of pages then, these have 93 and 31 pages. So on average, the term risk appears at least once on each page. I think this shows how important risk assessments are and the approach is. But how is risk defined? So the EN 9000 defines risk as the effect of uncertainty. There are several notes to it. One note says the word risk is sometimes used when there's the possibility of only negative consequences. I think this is often the fact, but nevertheless, risks can also have positive consequences by taking actions and in this way improving the systems. To add one more, the EN 9100 includes a chapter on risk-based thinking, and that states that this is essential to increase the effectiveness of the quality management system and to achieve improved results. And now, what does ACE 13100 require in relation to risk for audits? I picked out the last sentence of chapter 9.2 about internal audit. And this says the frequency of audits shall be reviewed and be increased if required due to process changes, quality, performance, or risk. And for supplier civilians, the first two sentences are there. The organization shall perform supplier risk assessments, which at a minimum include evaluation of results of suppliers' internal audits, suppliers' current quality performance, and part complexity. Another sentence there is the organization shall establish and execute appropriate surveillance methods to monitor supplier systems, processes, and products based on the risk evaluations. And in addition, what does the reference manual require and recommend in relation to risk? Next slide, please. So when we look at the introduction chapter of the reference manual, this says, this guideline defines the process requirements to be used by organizations to establish a procedure to implement, manage, and perform effective and risk-based internal and supplier surveillance audit program. So what I did, I have collected the main recommendations the reference manual gives for this. This is to implement an audit program based on risk assessments. The next is to use risk prioritization tools. And then, based on a risk evaluation, mitigate the risks by an appropriate response. One of the risk mitigation activities can be an audit, and to develop risk assessments that cover quality system, production process, special process, and also product conformity. So next slide, please. So, but now, what do these requirements mean, and how can we fulfill them? So there are mandatory requirements that have to be fulfilled, and additionally, a risk approach should be integrated. So how can that be combined? I tried to show it with this table. I would like to give an idea how to answer this question. So for the internal audit system, the AS 13100 defines 4 audit types. These are quality system audits, production process audits, special process audits, and product audits. And for these audit types, there are fixed frequencies which have to be fulfilled. You can see these in the second column. And as mentioned in the beginning, the frequency can be increased due to risk. So on the other hand, the risk approach can specify the scope of an audit. I put that in the right column here. So for QS audits, it's the area of focus, for example. For production process audits and also special process audits, it's, for example, the selection of part numbers or workstations. And also for product audits, the inspected parts can be selected based on risk. There is also a template in the reference manual that can be used for that. But to get this input for the risk-based approach, the first step is to define appropriate risk criteria. So to obtain this at MTU, we are working together with our quality engineers and also the production experts to implement the risk assessment. One note I would like to make here, I put above that the MTU's intent is a risk minimizing audit system. So the goal is not only to focus on the identified risks, but moreover to mitigate the risks through the whole audit process. So with this in mind, please go to the next slide. At MTU, we tried to use the new AS 13100 requirements as an opportunity. So we started a project in summer last year called Risk Minimizing Supplier Audits. And the goal was to develop a tool that would give us an indication of the need for an audit. So until then, supplier audits were performed according to fixed frequencies, depending on the product type and the classification. So what did we do within this project? As mentioned before, we started with the definition of risk criteria. So the AS 13100 gives some minimum criteria. We saw them before. These were the supplier's internal audits, the supplier's current quality performance, and also the part complexity. Another important criterion is the annual audit report of the supplier, and this gives us some information about their audit system. And to get in more detail, we defined criteria together with MTU suppliers experts. And of course, we searched for industry best practices. In the next step, then, we created a supplier audit risk assessment tool. And for this purpose, we prioritized the defined risks and put a weighting system behind that. Then the tool underwent several tests and optimizations. And with the help of the tool, the risk suppliers can be identified. And in addition, the tool shows the highest rated risk for each supplier. This is used then as an input for the annual audit plan. Based on that, we can define the audit frequency, the method, the type, the scope, the focus, and also the team we need for the audit. So next slide, please. So here you can see the new process for the annual audit planning at MTU. So what we do is an annual audit risk assessment for each supplier. And this is done by the MTU's Supplier Quality and Development Department. So for that, we have developed an Excel tool called the Supplier Audit Risk Assessment Tool with 16 criteria, which are all focusing on product quality. We have different characteristics and also weightings for this criteria. And we also defined 2 knockout criteria. This means when these criteria are met, this directly results in an audit need. So the assessment result is then a recommendation for an audit method. We have defined 4 categories depending on the overall risk. So there are no audit necessary, or to do at least a supplier self-audit with a predefined MTU questionnaire, or to conduct a remote audit if useful, or an on-site audit. And in addition, you get a hint for the audit focus. We get the 3 highest rated risks out of the tool. And so the responsible person can also give a recommendation for the audit type. So for example, a special process audit is needed. For the data processing, we developed an automatic summary of all the risk assessment results. So this database serves as the basis for the annual audit plan. And this also enables a centralized and also resource optimized planning. In addition, we will involve the technical experts in a really early stage, so during the risk assessment and also during the annual audit planning. Next slide, please. I would like to end with an excerpt from the introduction part of the reference manual. So the manual states, through this approach, it is anticipated that opportunities will be found to remove redundant audits across the supply chain and hence reduce the overall audit burden whilst improving its effectiveness. So we want to reach the overall goal to reduce the audit burdens by strengthening and also using the supplier's audit system. For this, the precondition, of course, is to have a relationship of trust between both. Then I have placed here 3 objectives for future development that we have defined in MTU. So one is to strengthen the supplier's audit system, and this enables to focus on so-called risk suppliers. And then we can develop them to get out of this condition. A new element we want to bring into the audit process are ethical aspects and also soft facts. And the third, the approach is to bring an element of surprise to the audit. So standards, yes, but not the same old thing. So next slide, please. Yes, that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.